said, let's start today's class. Good morning, distinguished guests, colleagues, and ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to today's Masterclass 1, NPO Regulators, titled Lessons from FATF Recommendation 8, Protecting the Non-Profit Sector While Mitigating Terrorism-Financing Risk. FATF Recommendation 8 has undergone significant evolution over the past decade. It is now widely recognized that protecting the non-profit sector from terrorist financing abuse must go hand in hand with protecting the legitimate activities of civil society organizations. The emphasis is no longer on treating all NPOs as inherently vulnerable, but on identifying those that are genuinely at risk through evidence-based national risk assessments and applying targeted, proportionate, and risk-based measures. Across Africa and beyond, many countries are undertaking reforms to align with this approach. While progress has been made, important questions remain. How do regulators effectively identify and supervise at-risk NPOs? How can government build trust and collaboration with civil societies? What practical lessons have emerged from countries that have conducted risk assessments? And how do we ensure that compliance measures do not unintentionally restrict humanitarian action or civic space? Today's discussion brings together distinguished experts representing different perspectives to share practical experiences, challenges, innovations, and lessons learned. Our objective is not only to reflect on what has worked, but also to identify opportunities for strengthening implementation of Recommendation 8 in ways that are effective, proportionate, and consistent with FATF standards. We encourage an open and candid conversation that will generate practical insights for policymakers, regulators, financial intelligence units, development partners, and civil society organizations across the continent. With that, let me introduce our distinguished speakers. To open our session, we're privileged to welcome a true veteran of Nigerian financial security architecture, Mrs. Ibinabo Mary Amakri. An Assistant Commander 1 of the EFCC, she brings over 20 years of deep expertise in anti-money laundering and countering the financing of terrorism. Currently, she serves as the head of SCUMO Lagos Directorate, where she oversees compliance for DNFDP sectors across Lagos State and Ogun State respectively. However, an impact on our discussion today stems from our 7 years tenure as the head of strategic analysis in Abuja office of SCUMO, where she managed the very data that identifies money laundering and terrorist financing threats. Most notably, Mrs. Amakri was the coordinator of the 2022 NPO Terrorist Financing Risk Assessment of Nigeria. A leadership in addressing deficiencies in FATF Recommendation 8 and immediate outcome 10 was a cornerstone of the national effort that successfully led to Nigeria being delisted from the FATF grey list in 2025. With background spanning the NFIU and the private sector and holding a CAMP certification, she is uniquely qualified to walk us through the journey from the initial mutual evaluation to the milestone of 2022 NPO risk assessment. Please welcome Mrs. Ibinabo Amakri to start to the interview. We can do better with the applause, please. Building directly on that foundation, our second speaker will explain how Nigeria turned those assessment results into action. Superintendent of the EFCC, Ali Abdullahi, is a certified FATF Global Standards expert and assessor with over 14 years of experience within the EFCC and SCUMO. As a member of the core working group for the 2022 risk assessment, Ali was instrumental in the technical work required to satisfy global monitors and successfully exit Nigeria from the ICRG. He joins us to discuss the post-assessment landscape, where Nigeria stands today, and how the country is already applying these lessons towards the ongoing 2026 NPO Risk Assessment Review. He reminds us that in this field, we must always be willing to learn more. Ali, please join us. While our two speakers will be providing a deep dive into compliance and risk assessment from a global Nigerian perspective, Mr. Felix Loga will share with us the viewpoint of a primary national regulator, helping us to understand how these standards are implemented on the ground in Ghana. Mr. Felix Loga is the Director and Head of the Non-Profit Organization Secretariat under the Ghana Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Protection. In his capacity, Mr. Loga spearheads the registration, regulation and coordination of all civil society and non-profit organizations across Ghana. His leadership at the Department of Social Welfare is central to ensuring that the NPO sector remains a transparent, well-coordinated and impactful partner in national development. We look forward to his insights on the evolving regulatory aspect in the region. It is now my pleasure to welcome our next speaker, who joins us from Accra, to provide a vital regulatory perspective. Finally, to complete our regional picture, we welcome a leader from the smiling coast of Africa. Mr. Ebrima Jabo is the Executive Director of the NGO Affairs Agency in the Gambia. With a background in education management and years of experience as a Deputy Director, now head of the agency, Mr. Jabo has been a key advocate for evidence-based NGO regulation. He will share insights into the Gambian model of NGO oversight before taking the helm and the importance of regional collaboration with maintaining the integrity of the third sector. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Ebrima Jabo. Now, we have a complete panel of speakers. Together, they represent the vanguard of NPO regulation and financial integrity in West Africa. They will take us back to the beginning of Nigeria's mutual evaluation journey. Mrs. Mary, please take the floor. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you very especially to Abuja, Nigeria, and I believe you're already having a nice time. So, for us to start this discussion, we have actually divided our presentation into 3 segments. The pre-National Terrorism-Financing Risk Assessment for the NPO sector, then conducting the National Terrorism-Financing Risk Assessment for the NPO sector itself. We're going to be sharing our own challenges. Then the last segment will talk about the lessons and the post-risk assessment. What are we now doing in terms of risk-based monitoring of the NPO sector? So to start very quickly, are you projected, please? Okay. So for us to start, we need to know where we are coming from, and that's the story we're here to tell. Before the Terrorism Financing Risk Assessment of 2022, in Nigeria, can you move the slides please, and concentrate. In Nigeria, NPOs were largely classified as reporting entities. This meant that, they were treated the same way we treated designated non-financial businesses and professions, meaning that they were required to take on the whole measures of conducting KYC, customer due diligence, file currency transaction reports, file STRs, and all of that. And as a matter of fact, we were using the same legislation both for the NPOs as well as the JNBPs, because that was the legislation that we had. Being the primary legislation and also the subsidiary legislation in terms of the school regulations. At the time, we had the school 2013 and 2016 regulations. So those were the pieces of instrument that we're using to regulate the NPOs at that time. So, and the same framework also was adopted, because for us, that was what we knew how to do, you understand? And again, it was much later we now decided to now create a separate template for reporting for the NPOs, but that did also solve the problem. In fact, it complicated the problem the more, because we're now asking NPOs to provide the source account where the monies are coming from, and the account, the destination account where the monies are going to. And all of that was overly, it became a burden on the NPOs. And at the time, our engagement with the NPO community was very, very minimal or limited. So the focus again was not even on terrorism financing, it was more on anti-money laundering on NPOs. So, now, Nigeria conducted the maiden National Terrorism Financing, Money Laundering and Terrorism Financing Risk Assessment. The maiden one, the first one, was done in 2016. I was privileged to be part of the working group on the Terrorism Financing Group. And being part of that working group gave us the opportunity to travel to the conflict areas, the Northeast. At that time, when attacks by Boko Haram were actually at the peak. So, what did we find out in terms of NPOs at that National Terrorist Money Laundering and Terrorist Financing Risk Assessment? The methodology that we use, I just want to give a very quick description of that methodology, because I had to look through what went wrong, you understand? That methodology was just focused on, we needed to bring out the terrorism threats, we needed to bring out the terrorism financing threats, and also the vulnerabilities. And if you look through the entire methodology, there was nowhere it stated that we were expected to actually look at what they call the FATF NPOs, the at-risk NPOs, the nature of threats, and the vulnerabilities. All that was clearly absent in that particular methodology. So, we're busy gathering data on the number of terrorism cases, the number of TF cases investigated, number of cases forwarded to law enforcement agencies, and all of that. So, NPOs were actually listed as one of the legitimate sources from where terrorist organizations can actually raise funds. So, in a nutshell, that methodology didn't do much or provided much roadmap in order for us to actually dissect the issues surrounding NPOs at that time. So, and the report of that risk assessment clearly showed that at the time, Nigeria had only 2 proscribed terrorist groups. That was what was captured in that report. And we had about 6 other violent groups. But interestingly, most of these violent groups now have actually now become even terrorist groups. Some of them actually. Let's go. So, what did we actually do in terms of NPOs in that risk assessment? Because like I said, methodology wasn't giving us a very good roadmap. So we relied on an existing typology that the NFIU at that time, prior to that time, had conducted, and even Gambia report of 2013, the trends and patterns of typology report on terrorism financing 2013. And in that report, there were case studies provided by law enforcement agencies of how NPOs were actually used to move money to conduct terrorism. A case in point was the 2010 Eagle Square bombing. So the analysis of that case clearly showed that a particular NPO was actually involved in moving funds for that terrorist activity at the time. So that was all that we could see, and we captured it in the report. So you see that there were so many challenges, because even in terms of technical capacity, it was inadequate across all sectors in the landscape. And there was also limited domestic operation, and at the time, even the sanctions committee was not functional. These were all the challenges that we had as a country. So let's move on. Now, mutual evaluation came 2019 by Gambia, and 2021 the report was ready. And what was the outcome of that report? Number one, it showed that Nigeria was not actually monitoring or supervising NPOs in line with the risk-based approach. Two, Nigeria had not conducted an independent risk assessment for the NPO sector. So whatever we're telling the assessors, it was dead on arrival. Because number one, we had not even conducted an independent risk assessment for the NPO sector. So they told us that, look, you can't tell us, oh, you're doing bits and bits of things without having the foundation. How do you build a house without laying the foundation? So those were part of some of the deficiencies that the NER report actually highlighted. So from that, when the NER report was published, we started engagement with the NPO community. And we also on our own started making extensive research about this NPO sector, because we needed to now learn much more about the NPO sector, because clearly there was a gap in terms of knowledge. And we also now started having joint examinations with the NPOs, coalitions, and all of that. Then in the Northeast, recall that at this point in time, the terrorism threat in Nigeria was still very high. So we started even paying more attention to what was happening in the Northeast by NPOs. What was their role, as it were? So our office there had to come up with what we call the cash movement register, where we now mandated international NGOs mostly that were moving cash to the deep field to at least come and register. Let people know. Let's start from somewhere. So let's continue. So this slide is activities that we had to now deliberately engage in. Okay, I can stand up. Yes. I should stand up. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you very much. So if you look at this slide, what we tried to do here was to actually capture all our activities, because we realized that documentation was now very key to the entire process. So we started chronicling all the activities, all our engagement with the NPO community, starting from when FIU conducted the first trends analysis report to the National Risk Assessment of 2016, then the various engagements that we had to do. Even if NPOs invited us to their function, when we come back, we raise a report and we record it. So we started moving. It was now becoming clearer gradually. So let's continue. So I've already mentioned the problem statement of what led us to where we are in terms of the deficiencies in the NER. So the first thing we needed to do was planning. Now we're about to conduct a risk assessment independently for the NPO sector, and we needed to plan. So one of the key things we did was that, well, of course we had to write a concept note to the leadership of the institution, outlining what the problems were, you understand, and all of that. So by the time we did that, then in-house, we had to set up a small team of my colleagues, you understand. And by the way, nobody appointed me to be a coordinator. I appointed myself because I took interest in the entire process, you understand. So we started learning. We looked at the report from UK and so many other countries. We did a lot of research. In fact, I appointed somebody to be our document or record keeping officer. And I told her, look, your duty is to ensure that everything we do must be well documented. And we said, okay. So by the time the concept note went to the then chairman of the commission, came back, he okayed it and said, we can proceed. So when we looked at it, I said, you know what, for us to make good progress, there's need for us to engage an external consultant. You know, chief executives don't want to hear that really. And they're like, no, the team can do it. I said, sir, we believe in ourselves, we can do it. But having done some level of research, I believe that there is need for us to engage an external consultant. So again, we put up a proposal back to the chairman of the DFCC. And that proposal was like, okay, this is where our competencies and skills lie. And these are the areas I believe we needed a consultant to come and support. And he gave the go-ahead. So we started looking out for who will that consultant be. And I said, there must be a Nigerian, then, of course, a foreign consultant. Then that was how we reached out to Green Acres and Associates, based in the UK, led by Ben Evans, and of course, Victoria from Spaces of Change was also now appointed. Then we gave them appointment letters because they are working with a government institution. And these are private sector persons, and you know that working with government, we have our protocols. Our protocols are quite heavy. So we needed to come up with what we call a non-disclosure agreement, where lawyers will tell you, we put several clauses, what they will do, what they should not do, how this information should be shared, how it will be disseminated, and all of that. And they signed up. So by the time they signed up, I said, okay, now we're ready to work. And so that was how the work now began. Of course, we have to identify the different stakeholders in the industry, as it were, spanning from the law enforcement agencies to the sectoral regulators, among the NPOs, the different coalitions, even state governments, because in every state in Nigeria here, there are ministries that are responsible for registering and some sort of monitoring of NPOs' activities. So we started writing to all of them, and these letters were signed by my own chief executive, the chairman. So by the time we did that and we received the nomination, it takes time. Then we set up a structure of how this work will be done. So we set up the core working group as well as the technical working group. The core working group, we told them what their roles and responsibilities were. Then the technical working group also had their own roles and responsibilities. Some of them are here in the room. So now, for me, the greatest ingredient in achieving a successful risk assessment for the NPO sector is the political commitment. You can have technical hands, you can have everything, but if there is no political commitment, I don't know what you're going to do. Are you going to use your personal funds to carry out the project? So it's very, very key. And again, the person at the top must also have some level of technical understanding of the issues you're even presenting. Because if the chief executive does not even understand, it's a problem. So, but we're so blessed in the EFCC. Even our current chairman is an expert in regulatory compliance. So, taking matters to them is not anything difficult. You understand? So, we have that. And the political commitment also transcends to budgetary provision. Money is important. Money actually makes the work move and move well. You can't conduct a risk assessment if you don't have funding for it. You understand? So funds were released for the risk assessment. We visited different locations in Nigeria. It cost money. We paid the flight tickets. We paid what we call the duty to allowance to each person. You understand? Each time we held a meeting, we also gave what we call sitting allowance. Some of them are here, they took our money, they ate our money. You understand? So, and these were the things that were motivating people to work. So we had provisions for that. Provisions was also made for publishing and printing of the report. And all these funds were released to my department, school, ahead of time, in order to cut off the bureaucracy. So I recall that for the NPO risk assessment, we spent about 25 million at that time. While for our outreaches and examinations, it was about 52 million at that time. All these funds were released in advance to school. So, with funds available, then work has started now. You understand? So we started engaging, and our first engagement with the consultant was by all the technical working groups, members, and everybody. And the discussion likely centered around on the type of methodology we're going to adopt in conducting the risk assessment. So this time around, we have read the FATF guidance on terrorist financing risk assessment. We have read the best practice paper on combating terrorist financing abuse for NPOs. We have also read the comments in Recommendation 8 and the interpretative notes. So we now knew where we're heading to. So, now, in terms of the methodology, several options were laid out, and we actually selected the one that encourages inclusive participation by all stakeholders. Inclusive participation, collaborative participation, that's very key. Because if you look through the best practice paper, that's what it actually recommends. So, you could have as well decided to say, we want to do a desk review, where we just pick already published papers on NPO risk assessment, make a summary and say we have conducted the risk assessment. That is also acceptable. So once we're okay with the methodology, then we moved on. For the stakeholders, if I remember correctly, we engaged with more than 22 agencies across the country. So for each location, of course, law enforcement agencies, primary, and they were part of the core working group as well as the technical working group. The National NPO Coalitions, the INGO Forum, and of course the state governments, even the Christian Association of Nigeria was carried along. The Nigerian Supreme Council for Islamic Affairs, they were all part of this project. So one of the key things I believe you can also leverage on is to open up so that everybody can come on board, but you must be able to control. Because where you have so many people, control can actually become very difficult. So, one of the things we now clearly had to do, number one, was to identify the FATF-defined NPOs. And we did that exercise with every member of the technical working group, with the help of the consultant. So at the end of that exercise, we produced a report, now clear assessment. It was flagged up on 16th November 2021, and our then chairman was physically present. On the last day, the validation again, he was also physically present. So that's to show you the leadership commitment and all of that. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Amakri. That was the masterclass in risk assessment history. Let's have a big round of applause for it. To continue with the next phase, which is the post-assessment, we have Mr. Ali, who will take us through the post-assessment exercise. Mr. Ali, the floor is yours, please.
I guess I can start. Thank you. So I wouldn't have much to present. So we no more call the NPOs DNMPPs anymore, which we needed to go to the law, the legal framework, and that needed to be addressed. Okay? And the Terrorism Prevention and Prohibition Act also was clearly now had to capture the NPO sector, clearly, because we can all agree and remember that as far as monitoring is concerned with the NPOs, is TF abuse related. We agree. TF related abuse only. So the Terrorism Prevention Act needed to be well equipped and addressed to capture the NPOs. Also, it was penalties had to come in, okay, in case where the NPOs go wrong. And there was an inaction of this SCUMO regulation 2023 that informed whatever supervision that, okay, let me not use the word supervision because it is very important, please. The BVP document, the FATF BP, clearly defines or speaks to, as far as the NPOs are concerned. I don't know why you guys are so fragile today. FATF always pamper you, you know. So they said, don't supervise them. Rather, you monitor them. So we use the word monitoring going forward for the NPOs. So the regulation now addresses whatever monitoring that will inform SCUMO's regulation in that sector. Yeah. So after this outcome of the risk assessment, it was important we do outreaches, speak to everybody within that space to know, yes, there was a risk assessment for NPOs, and then these were the outcomes. So part of the topics discussed in the outreaches were findings, of course, of the risk assessment, overview of terrorism financing, and of course the regulation, breakdown of what has been integrated in the SCUMO at-risk NPO regulation. Now that document can be found in on SCUMO website. It's there on the website. There's this thing called TFS. It is targeted financial sanction. It is a very critical factor when it comes to vetting, you know, within that space. So we had to, it's a standalone topic that needed to be discussed, you know. So again, it is important to remember that in this sector, what really gave us that score, good rating, you know, with the FATF that had to even include our report in the best practice document was that it was an all-inclusive risk assessment. It was together done with these NPOs. So that gave credence and a really good value. You know, it wasn't a regulator or a supervisor just sat down, did the desk review, you know, so it was really inclusive. Coalitions of NPOs were included, CSOs, the civil societies were included. So it was an all-inclusive risk assessment. So another important thing we needed to do was now to design a risk-based monitoring framework. How do we start monitoring the NPOs? So that document was designed, a framework for monitoring. Then we had to develop a matrix tool. A tool to first get whatever content or information should we need in arriving at who is even at risk within the sector. Yeah, which of course give us the statistics Madam gave us. We had 1,427 at-risk NPOs. And among that 1,427, we saw 134 to be at risk across around northeast, northwest, north central. So there was a really pushback. You know, when they call you at risk, ordinarily you would assume SCUMO has already labeled you as a TF abuser or something like that. But what was important to note was you could be vulnerable, there could be threats around whatever you are, where you're operating. So those were the key things we needed to make in our outreaches. We needed the NPOs to understand, look, we're not labeling you high risk. we're only, or at risk, we're only making you understand you could be vulnerable to TF abuse. There could be threats around those areas where you operate. Okay? Are we together? Please, you could ask if, in case something, that means I'm really on point for nobody to ask me, because I was expecting some sort of questions, yeah? So I'm on point, yeah?
Questions will come after.
I would have expected it now. So we were able to understand, we had 134 at-risk NPOs, and what was needed to be done was to go out for examination. You know, what is important is, again, I keep saying what is important, yeah? Because you have to adapt or adopt a risk-based monitoring for good utilization of resources. You agree? So after identifying 134, those were entities ready and ripe for examination. And we struck out, you know, those, Madam approved, there was so much approval for those activities. We had to design a new reporting template, examination reporting template, different from, you know, what the DNLPP sectors were used to be examined. And again, we had to deploy a questionnaire. We call it CFT, Counter-Terrorism, Financing of Terrorism questionnaire. It was more a tool we could use for offsite. If they fill the forms, they submit, it will give us or inform us, you know, positively good information about that entity. Of course, it was the reason for us to arrive at those number of at-risk NPOs. More so, have I missing anything, Madam? You know, I have to always consult with Madam. She drove the whole. Ma, have I missing anything? Oh, okay. So, the regulation really spoke to a lot of things like record keeping, you know, vetting of staffs, vetting of donors, vetting of what else? Donors, staffs, vendors, partners, you know, as far as an NGO or NPO is concerned, those things were part of those things. Were part of things you needed to be mindful of. There was, of course, something we labeled "What has changed." It was a title we had to give, you know, after the whole report and the whole process, the examination. There was a meeting and there was this label: "What has actually changed in this space?" So we have a good implementation of TFS by by NPOs today. We could see NPOs, you know, using the United Nations sanction list for screening, the Nigerian sanction list for screening, which is a very important process. Yeah, we could see them now. There was a de-escalation of the cash movement. I could tell you that surprisingly, a very large figure of billions we were able to get from the analysis of those forms they were filling for movement of cash. As it stands today, I'm not sure that there's any NGO or NPO moving funds within that. And of course, we have to applaud the regulator for the financial institution. A very collaborative effort was made on financial inclusion. So the use of, you know, those financial service providers instead of moving, you know, cash across the region. Improve risk understanding. Today you could see NPOs adopting a risk tool, you know, to assess, you know, those vendors or whoever they're dealing with. So that gives a clear definition of risk understanding. What else? The questionnaire, they've been very good in, you know, annual submission. Is actually captured in the regulation that they needed to be annually submitting that questionnaire. So it gives us reason to recalibrate whatever NPO annually. You know, if you have dropped down from your high risk, that will inform us. If you are now medium or low, that will clearly inform us. Nobody is saying anything. Is there any question? That's good. But I expected somebody to ask me, man, that maybe what happened to the low risk? Did anybody think to ask me that? Yes. Are you sure you wanted to ask me that? Yes. I will not say. I will wait for somebody to pick up the mic and ask you. Thank you. I guess that's all I need to say.
And your clap has come to start my own. Thank you. So, just to put things in perspective, Ghana has actually begun activities on NGOs registration. And so, again, the next one. Good. So, we are looking at the lessons that has come up with the recommendation 8 specifically. So, this is a reality check for Ghana and so that for the South region as well. Next. Now, what are we looking forward to? This is what the mandate of the non-profit secretariat established after the trainings to do. Effective regulation and coordination mechanisms that will facilitate durable partnership, one, with the non-profit community by taking into consideration the best practices all over. Then also the mission was to have a competent, functioning and sustainable non-profit sector in Ghana to be able to rally around the activities. Now, that mission is carried out with effective regulation to support the non-profit sector. What are we looking for? So that its contribution to development may be sufficient and even something new. Now, this is what it means. When we refer to recommendation 8 to us, just to remind you and then recap. One, the core thing is that the country should be protect NPO from terrorist financing abuse without disrupting legitimacy charity work. And so, having that understanding in mind, there is a usual saying that charity begins where? At home. So whatever you are doing to the NPO, make sure as much as possible do not affect the fabric of society. One, even because should one NGO fold up, family fold up, money fold up, then livelihood fold up, and many of the issues fold up. So that is the understanding we have on ground, that we have to move on that ground. Now, two, so we had the experience and lessons from Rec 8, giving us a tourism group globally abuses charity. That is one thing. One, because the consideration of the movement of money. Then two, provision of cover of operation. Then the third one also, the recruitment under humanitarian activity. And that's how come that when there is conflict, there is a disaster, and they are moving goods of aid. Please, it is much as possible to look at it. If not, those goods of food becomes an arm. That understanding is there. So that concept also informs us. So at the sub-region, it was also expected after our assessment, showing that Ghana has a large number of NPOs, but then the oversight responsibility is very weak. And so we picked it from this angle. Now, they're looking at it, we're taking 5 areas of concern. 1, the risk assessment we have to do. 2, the legal reform of frameworks has to happen. 3, outreach and education also taking place. The proportionate measure, that is to say that to what extent that we say NPOs, but the NPOs are there are some international, they are very large in number, others national, and some others are community-based. And therefore, you must not take all of them wholesome. Then the last one has to do with coordination. Coordination such that even if charity is beginning at home, it means that the father, mother, and the children, and even the other must be coordinated. There must be communicated understanding. So Ghana has taken that coordination aspect also as one of the areas of concern. Next. What do we do? Let's look at them. For the risks, the action taken is that the NPO sector risk assessment was found. We found out that the NPOs are low risk, but faith-based areas, humanitarian, asked by FATF definition. Like you are asking for questions, right? FATF definition means that the charity ones, the humanitarian ones, the religious and faith-based ones, yes, all of them. But don't forget that even within the faith-based ones, they are also in sizes. There are national ones, there are international ones, and there are also community-based ones. So even if we say that an NPO by FATF definition, it is that those who are religious or faith-based, please don't forget that those of them who operate within only community, what happens to them? Then the same faith-based ones are into charity work. The same faith-based one, when there's a disaster, they carry out humanitarian activity. So you realize that the definition and classification has become a problem, that we get that understanding. Are they absolutely faith-based? But if they are faith-based, their functions are religious. Their functions are humanitarian. So to some extent, they build capacity for one another. And even at one point, they said, those who mobilize or raise funds and disperse them. Hello? Yes. So that understanding has come to us. Then we looked at it and no, not just within the risk assessment. Then the lesson learned in that is that don't treat all MPOs the same. Some are high risk, some are medium, and some are low risk. And to some others who do not fall even under FATF definition at all. So those ones, when you come to the area of what? Monitoring and supervision, you can get an understanding to them. Then we come to legal framework. So in Ghana, we realized that the only law as at then was Company Law 19. That was also put all other organizations under one. But then we realized that no, we need to classify it. We need to revise these laws. Then we move from there to looking at ADNA 92, that the situation under which that the MPOs were put, just seen as companies. It's not because in Ghana, I mean some of our colleagues in this room, just last year we had a few. When we're talking about company, all of them, including even the MPOs, are seen as company. So first and foremost, you must register so that you can own your name and be identified as such, so that you are not, to some extent, somebody will say is that based on that grace. Then also Ghana has moved forward to look at the Trust Act of 2021 also as well. That has been revised. Then we looked at Act 10-1600, and then also policies, MPO policies were developed, then the directive was also given. And currently, as we speak now, there are guidelines even for the sector to guide our operation. This one, the lessons learned within this is that bring all MPOs under one regulatory and then make sure that their needs are addressed. Don't box all of them into one. Then for outreach and education, the action taken was what? All MPOs, even the MPO Secretariat, together with the Financial Intelligence Center, then also the Office of the Registrar General, that sits to the companies, as well as CSOs and Ghana Revenue Authority, together see to it that no, if this is the identification we have, then there is a need for some sensitization and education for the sector. Bringing the MPOs, bringing the CSOs, bringing the NGOs, both the NIGOs to work, to understand what it means by terrorist financing, and then outlining the typologies without any stigmatization. So first and foremost, that principle of what? Of the newness must first exist. And then within this section also in our work, this has been what our lesson, that engagement works must also go not heavily laden on the MPOs. So nothing with us or for us must be with us. So when we are working at it, we must work with the CSOs so that as we get to the training section, they explain themselves further. Then we looked at it as proportionate measure. That is to say that you don't shut the sector down. You don't shut the sector down, but what you do much more is that make sure that reporting and targeting monitoring is done, not only with the high-risk ones identified, but also enhanced even with the community base. Because in some of the sections, you realize that some smaller NGOs, as we call them, community based, you say the bigger one transfer money to them. But if they request for 2,000, they transfer 4,000 and ask that please use only the 2,000 and retransfer the other 2,000 to another account for me. What is happening? They are trying to use them as a cover to be able to do this. Then it came to, so within that we realized that the lesson is what? You balance security with allowing the aid delivery. That must be as much as possible, even to the sector of the needy. Then finally, when it comes to coordination, we work alongside with the financial intelligence sector, we work with the Office of the Registrar of General Companies, with also the CSOs themselves, making sure that issue relating to what? Money laundering, issue relating to terrorist financing, all that is said about the sector, their understanding is clarified and any mix around it is also dealt with. What is the lesson there? The sector also can be regulated not only in acceleration but with others. Finally, then there are 4 key things. Please don't de-risk the whole sector. Please, they are in segments. And then for the good work, we must also make sure that, because it got to a point that the banks were saying that if you have this amount, then this is what you should do. Compliance is not a risk targeting for action. Then also data is also one important. For Ghana, we have almost...
Sorry.
Thank you very much. I think we are still in the morning.
Yes.
Good morning, everybody. Greetings from the Gambia. Mine is a very short one, but prior to I will talk a little bit about my country as far as NRA is concerned. In 2019, in the Gambia, we conducted a national risk assessment of NPOs. So I'll come to my presentation. I just want to give you a little background of what we did as a country. Although I have my colleague here from the FIU, probably will elaborate more on it later. We did an NRA on the NPO sector in the Gambia in 2019. And then we are currently doing our second one. But in 2019, Gambia had about 120 NGOs in our database, registered NGOs with the NGO Affairs Agency. However, we have more NGOs than that. The reason is that registering with the NPO sector in the Gambia with the agency is purely voluntary because of the framework we have. We have what we call Decree 81, which limits the agency not to monitor all the NGOs in the country. We have a first year of registration, which is under the Register of Companies at the Ministry of Justice. All institutions must register with the Register of Companies. So when after registering there, you'll be responsible for monitoring the activities of those particular institutions. So as far as the agency is concerned, government gives us the mandate to register NGOs and give them license and monitor their activities closely. So we have then, in 2019, we had 120 NGOs. When we had our national risk assessment, out of the 120 NGOs that we registered, we have 11 that the assessment identified as being at risk of terrorist abuse. We are a small country, but surrounded by Senegal. However, we are not free of risk because we know what is happening in the Sahel. So out of the 11 that we identified as being risk, they were definitely, to be honest with you, they were definitely supposed to be assessed seriously because of where their resources were coming from. You would agree with me that there is what we call a UN sanctions list. So some of the monies of those NGOs were coming from those countries in the Middle East. So when they come to Gambia, it was difficult for even the NGOs to access the monies because central bank used to do what we call due diligence. So it was always difficult for them to access it because of where the monies were coming from. Aside that, we are doing another assessment currently. And then we have more NGOs under my office's purview. We are now at 143. Why? Because of the decree we use. Maybe the criteria is a little bit stiff with some of the organizations for them to access this licensing. But however, we are on the process of revising the criteria for registering with us. And then we also have new laws. We have what we call an NGO bill as well as national NGO policy that are on draft stage. However, the NGO bill, which seeks to repeal Decree 81, is at an advanced stage. And when it is repealed, then all the NGOs in the country, irrespective of those that are registered with AE chambers, that's the Register of Companies, they have to be monitored and evaluated by the NGO Affairs Agency. So mine is transitioning from the old to the revised for that recommendation 8. We are all aware that the first recommendation 8 was a little bit stringent in the way it handled the NPO sector. So in the revised recommendation, sorry, you can move on, please. This is the first one, as you can see up there. This is the previous approach, and then this is the revised approach. So all countries are now beginning to shift to the revised approach of NPO 8. Gambia is not an exception. We are doing some measures to make sure that we are in line with modern issues. This is why we are trying to revise our laws, so that at least that will, reduce the how do I call it again, the rigidity in monitoring and handling NPO work in the country. Move on, please. So, just like any other government, we are encouraged to understand the NPO sector through risk assessment, which we did, and we continue doing. We continue monitoring. At our level, we monitor NGOs every quarter. We try and monitor all the NGOs, because there are not many, there are just 143 in our database. We make sure that every quarter, we know what each NGO is into, and then we do a report. Please move on. And then, the Gambia's transition. The Gambia continues to strengthen its approach through what? Review of the legal and policy framework. Like I said at the beginning, we have Decree 81 that was since 1996. So this decree is being repealed now. We have a new NGO bill that has already gone through cabinet, and then, it is at an advanced stage. And so that will even give us more way to be able to handle NGO operation more effectively. This is why in our previous assessment, our country was already partially compliant, because we have challenges in monitoring the other part that is not under our organization. Institutional strengthening of the agency. We also have a database. Like I am here right now, as I was sitting here, I was looking at some of the stuff that is happening in my own database. I am able, in any NGO that you thought, I will be able to check quickly and tell you what is happening there, which is very, very key. But if you are monitoring, these are very difficult institutions to monitor. And then they intervene in different areas. Increased stakeholder engagement, which we normally do. We talk closely with other stakeholders like the FIU, the Gambia Immigration Department, GRA, and the Gambia Revenue Authority, because when it comes to duty issues, stuff like that, it is through that institution that NGOs can have. We also do capacity building initiatives. In just not long ago, we had one with Spaces for Change in the Gambia. They came and trained about 50 out of this number, 50 NGOs on AML CFT issues. And then we continue to improve collaboration among national institutions. Please move on. So exactly, these are the key reforms that we are into. Like we have revision of the NGO bill, development of national NGO policy. Of course, the risk-based supervision is what we are doing. And then we also did an NGO mapping not long ago, mapping of all the NGOs in the country. And then we strengthening our database. This is wherever I am, I'm able to access live as any of my colleagues. Then compliance monitoring, we continue doing it, like I said, on quarterly basis. Public awareness campaign, institutional coordination, capacity building, and either reform, etc. When it comes to capacity building initiated by the agency, we plan to do this one. This is just a continuous, like a routine work for us. AML safety awareness programs, we continue to do that. Recommendation sensitization, NGO governance training, financial accountability workshops, risk assessment training, compliance guidance, collaboration with Java, partnership with Tango. Tango is the Association of Non-Governmental Organizations. It's the umbrella body in the Gambia of all the NGOs. There are members in Tango that are not under my purview. I want you to understand that. It's just an umbrella. It's an umbrella body. And Tango is an NGO. We monitor their activities. We also have very close relationship with our development partners in the Gambia. Of course, we have challenges. We have still some remaining challenges that we are battling with, like capacity constraints, limited digital reporting system, governance gaps, among some organizations, resource limitation, need for continuous ML awareness. These are some challenges that we continue to grapple with. However, we're trying to improve on them as much as we can. So we have some practical lessons from the Gambia, like we normally dialogue between regulators and NGOs. That is very, very common that we do, because we normally every year we'll have what we call an NGO forum, where we'll invite all the NGOs under one roof, and the stakeholders, they come and dialogue, and each of them will come up with their, challenges, stuff like that, and we see how best we can address it. We also, good governance with this organizational risk. We're doing this, like I said, because we are trying to improve on our framework. Because the one we currently using has limited the agency itself very, very, because it was there due to the military rule. Yes, yes, please move to this. See if you don't have that. Now we have the way forward. The things that we think when we do probably will improve more on our risk-based approach to the NPO sector, like continued implementing of the risk-based conditions, strengthening governance with NPOs and promote regular stakeholder engagement. These are very, very important areas. Move on, please. So now, in the key takeaways, the revised recommendation is about protecting and not restricting the NPO sector. We are fully aware of that, because that's the only way out. In as much as we try to protect the NPO sector, we should not limit them such that it will affect the grassroots, because they are beneficiaries, as you say. Just please, let me say. Now, our conclusion is this: a proportionate risk-based framework strengthening AML CFT while enabling civil society to contribute to national development. So our key message is that regulations are essential to protecting the integrity of the Gambian non-profit sector while enabling it to continue delivering vital services to communities. The goal is a resilient, transparent, and trusted profit sector that continues to deliver essential service while safeguarding against misuse. Thank you.
We are grateful to Mr. Diabo for that concluding presentation. With all speakers having shared their insights, we proceed to the question and answers session. I have some questions here for our speakers. Let me start by asking each one of them, within 1 or 2 minutes, to tell us, based on their experience, what do you consider the single most important lesson your institution or country has learned in implementing FATF Recommendation 8. So let's take the responses starting from Mrs. Ibinabo. I'll speak on behalf of Nigeria. Then Mr. Ali has anything to add, you'll add. Then we go to Mr. Logan from Ghana, and finally Mr. Jabo from Gambia.
Okay, thank you very much. So for me, I think one of the key lessons we have learned as a country is the fact that as government agency, we are now more open in working with the private sector, especially the NPOs. And that lesson didn't come cheap, I can tell you. We started from a place of disagreement, a place of confrontation, a place of criticism, and a place of tension between school and the entire NPO community. Now, what triggered all of this was, let me just give you a small story. After we published the 2016 NRA report, an NPO actually now did a critique of that report, and went ahead and published it in an international Twitter handle. So I got hold of that report, I downloaded it, and drew the attention of my directors. And I said, look at the work we did, and I don't know this person, totally criticized the entire work. Then we looked for that person. You understand? And we said, can we have a discussion? And we indeed had that fruitful discussion, and there was better understanding. And from that point of understanding, we began to engage. And they actually went back and wrote a rejoinder on that international platform. And that bettered what we're seeing today, our relationship with Spaces for Change and the entire NPO community. So I want to really say that it's a good one. So we have learned to now communicate better. We understand ourselves. When there are issues, they reach out to us. They get the government perspective. We also engage them fully into what we are doing. So that's the key lesson we have learned as a country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ali, do you have anything to add to that? Yes. Let's give it to Mr. Logan.
Thank you. I was just telling my colleague that it's like my time was shorter than his own. and that's how come that I ran over my slide very fast. Lessons learned, most especially for us in Ghana, it is where we have realized that, just go back to the slide, your hand, this one is that the goal is not so much of, but taking the oppression from the NPOs and then making it much more open to them, that everything that they have to work, that's main lesson we learned. Well, the government outfits that regulate, but then it is to the best interest of the citizen. So in short, this is what we have learned from the assessment, and this is what we have. Thank you.
Mr. Jabo.
Yes. Thank you very much. I think for me, I have learned a lot from the Nigeria's presentation. Madam has definitely given us a very good tip as to how to become compliant now. Yes, definitely. I think going back home, we'll continue talking to school, of course, to guide us through the process, because so that we can move from partially compliant to compliant. I think we can do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes. Thank you for your responses. Now, the floor is open for participants to ask our speakers questions. So by raising up your hands, please just indicate you have a question and the mic will come to you.
Mr. Yemisi can testify. So we have to deliberately work on that and look. That suspicion was so huge that when we went to visit the state, he said, no, all this explanation, I'm not sure this is what you're coming to do, that just research. So, and that state was key for us. So what we now did, we did all the other states. Mr. Yemisi, you recall, that particular state, we couldn't access the government authorities. So we came back and replanned. Now they have to explain to that governor, Your Excellency, look at, we've been to other states and it's not what you think. This is what it is. Then he said, okay, you can now go ahead. So we had to do a second visit to that particular state. So one of the key issues was that issue of suspicion by the NPOs and even some other government authorities. Then of course there was resistance as well. Resistance. Because in the NPO community, we also learned, this also afforded us opportunities to learn. NPOs will tell you that they have what they call, is it principle of neutrality? And OAG. I've forgotten the meaning. They don't want to say now. They know. So, and they tell you that, look, for them, this is their work, that they have to provide livelihood, they have to save life, you understand? And law enforcement authorities are saying, you can't, for example, treat a wounded Boko Haram member. You can't provide food for a known Boko Haram member. Are you trying to do that so that it gets strength and now attacks the state. Do you understand? So we had that, in fact, it was a serious debate in Maiduguri. You understand? I remember again, that was why I told you that the meeting we had for the INGO forum, it was rescheduled twice. The first one was, there was a deadlock, dead on arrival. We're talking, they were not listening. We're talking, they were not listening. We're talking, so we said, you know what? We need to call up this meeting. Resistance. So we went back. And everything is tied to money. We have to now secure a bigger venue. All thanks to the Borno State government. They provided us a bigger venue. We came back and we said, you know what, guys? This is what we are here to do. I think by that second meeting, all the nerves, all the tension had gone down a little bit. So we're able to now achieve or engage in that productive dialogue. So those were the issues I can readily say that we had the suspicion and also resistance. How did we disseminate these policies at the end of the day? For us, we already have like our champions, as OAPC put it. So disseminating it became a lot easier for us because we used all the coalitions that, like the Nigerian network of NGOs, they have well over 4,000 members. You understand? And there are different coalitions like that across the country. So now, getting these policies, these reports to those NGOs was no longer a difficult task. You understand? So it was, they became our own champions in ensuring that these messages were adequately disseminated. You know. So someone also asked at the sub-region how we can better collaborate. I think it's very important. And I remember sometime in 2017 at Skumu, we received a delegation from Ghana. Ghana came to say that they want to actually understudy Skumu to see how we are actually supervising the entities on our own. Because you know that here in Nigeria, the JNBPs and MPOs are not supervised by the FIUs as it is in many other countries. We have a different agency, EFCC Skumu, that does that. So we hosted Ghana 2017, and after Ghana, I think Kenya has also come to see what we're doing. So I want to say that the doors for collaboration are open because, like you rightly mentioned, it's a transnational organized crime. So, yes, Gambia also came. Yes, thank you, Ali. Then the coordination amongst the stakeholders about, is it the financial sector? So what we did in the working group, we also had somebody from the Central Bank of Nigeria. He represented number. So for the financial sector, they were also fully part of the assessment because the instrument was sent to them, and of course, after the report was published, you know, there was a small multi-stakeholder to look at the issues of de-risking. Because part of what the report highlighted as a vulnerability was the use of cash and movement of cash. And the complaint we received was that at the time, there were no presence of financial institutions operating. So the last question I'll respond to here is understanding the typologies of TF abuse and how we go about the on-site visit. I don't know if that's clearly captured. We segmented the risk, like I said earlier. So the northeast, the northwest, the north central, very high and high. So our focus was actually on those buckets of very high and high risk. And also in terms of the on-site visit. For the on-site visit, recall that for us, we're able to now identify 1,427 at-risk NPOs. Even within these at-risk NPOs, they were further segmented. We have the ones that are high risk, the ones that are medium high, medium and low. So our primary attention was actually on the high risk and also the medium high risk. So in terms of outreaches as well as examination, that was what we needed to tackle squarely. And for outreaches, it was when we had finished with those two buckets of risk, then we now looked at areas of medium risk and also low risk. So we went to places like Lagos, the Southeast, to still do a couple of outreach programs. Thank you very much.
As I indicated earlier, I was referring to the weak political will was before reassessment, but after assessment, political will has improved, and that is also one of the benefits that we have. Just last year again also, maybe quickly on the sub-region, we have some delegation from Nigeria as well, with the parliament accepted in Ghana, and so the regulator, that is also to set. One of the things we realized as a regulator in Ghana is some of us, as we realize that the CSOs have forgotten that the government establishment are also there to guide them and also advise on operations and thematic areas that you registered with and start with. Sometimes if funding is not coming, you want to shift to the other end because there's more funding in that area. Before you realize, then the rules and the guidelines that will get you up, you are into different area of education, and because there's no funding, the funding is coming from other religious activity, you want to move there. These are some of the things that is causing a lot of the NPOs that are struggling in that area. So we notice this very seriously that we have to work at it. And when it comes to experience and dissemination sharing, right from my slide you can see we do webinars for the center, we do webinar, and then also share flyers, what it means, so the government can work with in that team. And so, yeah, in brief, this is what Ghana will do. Thank you.
I want to answer this question from my colleague Malawi. In the government, like I said in the presentation, we have the register of company under the Ministry of Justice. They register all institutions, that's their responsibility. So the NGO Affairs has a mandate to regularize or to coordinate the activities of all registered NGOs within its mandate. So those organizations that are registered at the Ministry of Justice are given what we call a certificate of incorporation. This gives them the legality now to operate in the country. So should they want to have NGO license, that's when they come to the NGO Affairs and then they try to fulfill the criteria we have in place, and then we'll have to look at those registered under the Ministry of Justice are monitored by the Register of Companies. They are not left free because just a couple of months ago, they had an advertisement on radio and television that all registered institutions must submit their returns. It's just telling you that they have a good grip of whatever they are doing. So those that are in need of NGO license are mandated to do. I hope I'm clear about this.
Once again, a round of applause for the panelists. They have done well, wonderfully well, and because of time, with this we come to the conclusion of this set of activity or sections. A round of applause as the panelists go back to their seats.